Hey, welcome to the Love People Use Things podcast. My name is Matt Fradd. Thanks again for tuning in week after week. Or if this is your first time, it's good to have you. Be sure you go check out our other episodes. Today, I want to respond to a question that's often asked of me when I go and speak at colleges or high schools or wherever. People might say something like, if porn isn't as glamorous as people make it out to be, why would anyone participate in it? Right? So in other words, if porn isn't glamorous, if it is actually degrading, if the people who are involved in pornography actually don't really enjoy it or they believe themselves to be degraded by it, why would they do it? The implication of the question, of course, being that porn isn't degrading, right? There is a sense of glamour to it. There's a way in which it can be fulfilling. How do you respond to that? That's what we'll be talking about today. Before we do, however, I want to say a big thanks to everybody who has begun supporting Love People Use Things on Patreon. Seriously, really huge thanks to all of you who've done that. I've said it before, and I want to kind of reiterate this. I've written a booklet, and I'm trying to print these. And it's quite expensive. Like if I print 5,000 to get everything put together, you know, like the PDF file and the graphics, it's going to cost me just a little over 3,000. Now, that might be for 10,000 copies, but it's quite a bit of money. And so if you want to begin supporting the Love People Use Things campaign, the whole idea, right, is that I'm going to print these booklets by the tens of thousands and bring them with me to the high schools that I speak at, so that after I, hopefully, inspire them, I want to give them these booklets to walk away with that have a lot of great resources in it, because, you know, you can give someone an emotional experience and convict them, but you want to kind of leave them with something as well. So if you want to support that work, you could join the Love People Use Things campaign. And let me tell you what you'll get in return. Okay, you'll get my book, The Porn Myth, Exposing the Reality Behind the Fantasy of Pornography, and I'll sign that for you. You'll also get a great book called Equipped, Smart Parenting in a Sexualized World. You'll get a month of Covenant Eyes for free. You'll get a Love People Use Things sticker. You'll get 25% off a Love People Use Things t-shirt. We're going to try and see soon if we can maybe even give you that for free, so stay tuned. You'll also have access to live stream events that we plan to do for men and women and for parents. So there's quite a lot involved there, right? I mean, that's a lot. And so if you want to join the Love People Use Things campaign, help me print these booklets and do all the other things that are associated with the costs of Love People Use Things, go to lovepeopleusethings.fm and click support and just give $10 a month, and I send those gifts out at the beginning of every month, and I'd really appreciate it. Okay, but on to today's topic. If porn isn't as glamorous as people make it out to be, why would anyone participate in it? You know, I've had the real privilege of working alongside people in the sex industry. The first person I ever met in the sex industry, amazing woman, her name was April. And, I reached out to her. She was living in LA. I was living in Ireland at the time. And, I just made contact with her because I knew that she had left porn and that she was talking about how negative her experience was of it. And my wife and I, as I say, were living in Ireland, and we actually raised the money to fly her from LA here in the States to Ireland, and we rented out the jazz club in Dublin. If you're from Ireland or if you've ever been to Dublin, maybe you've been there. And we basically said to the people, okay, we're going to fly a porn star here just to talk about pornography. And the reason I'm laughing is that the guy thought we were pro-porn. And so he was like, oh, man, that's awesome. I can't do the accent. I'm sorry. I'd like to apologize to all the Irish people listening right now. He's like, I'll throw you in visual for free. We were like, great. And then I thought to myself, I won't tell him now. I'll just let him realize that we're not pro-porn when she comes. But it was a really great night. We had people in the streets of Dublin handing out these flyers, and I think we called it Porn Exposed or something like that. And, there were kind of these flyers which you couldn't tell if we were for or against it. It was just about her sharing her experience, and we absolutely packed the place that night. And while we were there, April shared her story about what it was like being a porn performer. And I think this is the common experience of people who've been in the sex industry. Even though they want to project this notion that it's glamorous, it's anything but glamorous. It's anything but glamorous. So Dr. Sharon Mitchell is she co-founded the Adult Industry Medical Healthcare Foundation, also called AIM, A-I-M. And for about 20 years, she was a porn actress and director herself. After opening her clinic, she saw well over, she says, 1,000 porn stars every month for STD testing. By the way, I don't like this term porn stars. I think we should say porn performers. I think stars glamorizes it. So anyway, she saw over 1,000 porn performers a month. Can you imagine? Over 1,000 people a month for STD testing. So my point is, it's probably safe to say that Dr. Sharon Mitchell knows a thing or two about porn performers. I mean, can you imagine what that's like? You're doing these STD testing. Presumably, you must get into discussions about their health, both physical and emotional, right? And anyway, Dr. Mitchell says that there are 3 types of women drawn to the porn industry. Number 1, there are those who are desperate for money. Number 2, there are those who are desperate for fame. And thirdly, there are those who are addicted to sex. All right? In my opinion, these 3 primary motivations open for us 3 windows into the world of pornography. And what we discover isn't good, right? We discover 3 ugly facts about it. So let's go through those one at a time. Desperate for money, desperate for fame, addicted to sex. So desperate for money. The first type of motivation of someone who's desperate for money is very common in the industry. Very common. And it shatters the illusion that pornography is just a celebration of a woman's free choice. All right, listen to this quotation from legal scholar Catherine McKinnon. It's really powerful. She says this: "As with all prostitution, the women and children in pornography are, in the main, not there by choice, but because of a lack of choices. They usually consent, scare quotes, only in a degraded and demented sense of the word, in which a person who despairs at stopping what is happening, sees no escape, has no real alternative, was often sexually abused before as a child, may be addicted to drugs, is homeless, hopeless, is often trying to avoid being beaten or killed, is almost always economically desperate, acquiesces in being sexually abused for payment." Right? Doesn't exactly sound like women's empowerment, does it? And I think this is a really good point, because this is something I used to tell myself all the time when I would look at porn, especially as a teenager, before I had any inclination to be sorry for what I was doing. I'd always say stuff like, well, this is her choice. I mean, she wants to do this, so what's the problem? But as Catherine McKinnon says, it's not necessarily because of their choices. It's due to a lack of choices. And should this surprise us? I mean, we have this tendency, don't we, when we watch people in movies or read about musicians, we tend to think of them as different sorts of humans, right? Somehow different to the rest of us. But of course, this isn't true. And this is also not true of those who are in the porn industry. I mean, obviously they're unique individuals, but they're still human beings like you and me, and like the people we interact with on a daily basis. Right? They're people who have fears and ambitions and things that make them happy, right? A particular way they like their coffee, let's say, hopes for the future, they use an iPhone or an Android. Now, you think to yourself, why am I saying all these things? Well, I'm saying this because they're human. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're human beings. They don't like being stopped at traffic lights and these sorts of things. And I say this because too often we treat them like they're different sorts of human beings. Like, oh, no, these people, they like being abused for payment. Yeah, that's the sort of people they are. But this isn't true at all, right? This isn't true at all. And just like the people in your life, ask yourself the question, how many of them, what would it take for them to agree to be a porn performer? And maybe some people who are more likely than others, but I think the answer is, it's like, no, man, they're not doing this because, hey, this is what I've always dreamed of doing. They do this because of a lack of choices, right? They're desperate for money. Like, it's a quick way to make money, So, okay, here's the second reason Dr. Sharon Mitchell says that women get into porn, and that's because they are desperate for fame. Desperate for fame. The second... So Dr. Mitchell says that this kind of woman, right, she believes it's this second category, this type of woman who has the most crucial needs, right? More so than those who are desperate for money and those who are addicted to sex. This is just what she had to say. I'm not necessarily agreeing with it. Well, why? Why does Dr. Mitchell say that this type of woman has the most crucial needs? Well, because because of the roots of why they're addicted to fame, right? I mean, think about it. They come to LA, perhaps, thinking porn is going to be a backdoor to Hollywood, only to be profoundly disappointed, right? Furthermore, the reason they're so drawn to the infamy porn offers them, she says, is because they come from a very bad family life, right? Some of them are survivors of abuse or neglect, acting out of that brokenness, right? They see themselves for the camera, hoping it'll earn them the attention that they desire. I mean, isn't this true? Like, I mean, even if you think about people who, like, maybe at a young age begin sleeping around, right? The likelihood that they have a well-attentive dad and mum is unlikely, you know? Or if they do have parents who are engaged, it's unlikely that they haven't suffered some degree of trauma or abuse as kids. Like, this just isn't what people naturally do. And I think it's the same thing could be said about porn performers. Like, choosing to be a porn performer isn't what people naturally aspire to do, right? In this category, we're talking about women who have a desire for fame, right? And they think that this is going to be, as I say, a backdoor to Hollywood. And many of them are looking for the attention, right, that they perhaps should have had but didn't have in an appropriate way when they were children, right? Probably the one female porn performer who's become more famous than any other today is Jenna. I'm not going to say her last name because I don't know if that's helpful, but you probably know who I mean. She wrote a New York Times best-selling book, and reading her memoir, you can see how driven to fame she was, and in some sense, she succeeded, right? But listen to her words. This is from her book, okay? This is the most popular porn performer. She's made it the biggest, bigger than anyone else so far. Here's what she says. Listen to this. Quote, "I never take the time to feel the effects of my choices. Maybe it's because I would be ashamed, maybe afraid. I realize I have avoided my pain for as long as I can remember. It's what I've been taught. Be strong, little one. Things can only get better. As life goes racing by me, all the while my soul goes on with sickness. Yes, sickness. It feels like it's ailing because the one that should be nursing it is too busy trying to succeed and be accepted. I'm certainly scared that if I try to fix what's broken in me so long ago, I may not succeed. So I go on faking that I'm whole, that I'm proud, that I'm strong." End quote. When we support the pornographic culture, and by support, I mean just going to porn sites, whether you're paying or not, you know, they're still benefiting from your visit. We're contributing to the illusion that porn is somehow the start of something great for these actresses and actors. And let me tell you, as somebody who has known multiple people who've been in the sex industry as porn performers, right? This is not the start of something great when they get into porn, right? This is the start of their undoing. The stories that those in the industry say, right, the stories they tell us are drearily predictable. They almost always involve some serious form of abuse and neglect when they're young, and it doesn't end well. Just like my friend April, who I told you about. Like, her story doesn't end well. I wish I could say it did, but it doesn't, you know? All right, the third group, those addicted to sex. The last type of motivator, the woman who's addicted to sex, is the misleading face of pornography today, okay? The misleading face of pornography today. The woman who portrays herself as just a well-rounded nymphomaniac, okay, right, who just loves being the center of male sexual attention. For instance, I was reading an interview with one performer who said before getting into porn that she had already had sex with 98 men. In her own words, she said this, here's a quote from her, "Sex plays a massively huge role in my life because I worship sex," end quote. Now, you might be thinking, or people may have asked you, people have asked me certainly, what's possibly wrong with this? Like, what's the problem, right? Here are women who know what they love. They're able to make money doing it, so what's the problem? Well, I think here's the problem. By definition, someone who is hypersexual is not a well-rounded person. Now, I'm not here talking about someone who loves sex or has lots of sex, someone with a strong sexual desire. I'm talking about someone who has an obsessive and compulsive pursuit of sex, which can actually be a symptom of all kinds of psychiatric problems. like if someone's suffering from some kind of hypersexual disorder, let's say, here's a question. Is it virtuous to exploit this person's condition? Right? I mean, like let's think of another case think of an analogous case. Take sex out of the picture for a moment. I think we can see a lot clearer when sex is removed from the picture, right? Imagine finding somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome. What is that, Prader-Willi syndrome? Well, it's a genetic disease that includes the symptoms of constant hunger. Okay? Suppose you found somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome and you entered them into a pie eating contest or something so that others could watch and be totally amazed at how much this guy could put away. I mean, how exploitative is that? Like, that's not cool, man, at all. You don't exploit somebody's sickness, make a freak show out of them. But I think this is what we're doing if, indeed, there are people like this porn performer I quoted a moment ago when she said she worships sex. You know, we're essentially putting them into this sexual contest, like a pie eating contest, right? And using them for entertainment. Not cool, man. Not cool. I think that we have a social responsibility not to support an industry that people find themselves in only because they're driven there by a misguided need for fame, right, and sex, or a desperate need for money. No matter the level of consent a woman gives to being exploited, it's a virtuous thing to treat a woman who's forgotten her dignity with dignity nonetheless. So I just want to close with that thought. I want to close with that thought, right? Virtue, the word virtue, comes from the Latin root vir, which means man, all right? Virtue, etymologically, could mean manly strength, okay? I think it's a manly thing to treat a woman who has forgotten her dignity with dignity nonetheless. Because often people will view porn and they'll say, well, she wants to do it. And we're essentially saying, like, so long as I don't rape anybody, I'm being good. That's essentially what that means, right? When you hear somebody say something like, hey, dude, it's fine. She's willing to do it. What they're saying is basically the only way they could do something wrong in the sexual realm is by raping somebody. And I don't think that's true. I mean, all you got to do is to see why this is the case. Like, think of a woman who's dear to you. And I know we have a lot of women listeners. I know that a lot of women view pornography, and maybe there's women now, I'm sure there are women who are listening to this who view pornography. But let's just focus on, I'm a man, right? So I'm speaking from the vantage point of a man, so I hope that's okay. Like, think of if you're a man, right, or a woman, right? Like, let's say you got a woman in your life, maybe your mother, maybe a sister, maybe a daughter, maybe a friend, right? Suppose this person wanted to go out, get hammered drunk, and just make out with some random stranger, right? And just go back to her apartment with them, right? Because she's whatever. She's trying to medicate something. Imagine the respect you would have for a man who's like, hey, look, man, I like you a lot and I'm having fun, but you're kind of drunk and I don't think we should do this right now. Like, I think we should wait. If that seems like an impossible situation to you, then you've been made severely cynical, I think, by this pornified culture, because it is possible, actually. You know, I see it. I've done it myself. Like, I've been in situations where a woman was the one telling me she wanted to have sex, and I was the one who said no. Like, this is back in my teenage years, you know? And she was kind of offended by that. But still, it's a manly thing to treat a woman who has forgotten her dignity with dignity nonetheless. Last week, we said, you know, the only thing that can conquer a desire is a stronger one. I think this is something we should tap into. Like, if you're a man listening to this and you look at porn, you might say, well, what could possibly be stronger than my desire to, like, exploit women? Well, I think this is it. I think what can be stronger than that is your desire to love one, right? To fight for one, right? To use your strength for self-mastery. Sometimes you'll meet these guys, right? And they're hooking up with women, and or this, maybe they're in a dating relationship, and they'll say something like, like, I would take a bullet for her. Which is a very noble thing to say, but the likelihood of them needing to take a bullet for their girlfriend is, unless she's involved in organized crime, it's unlikely. And so you kind of want to say to someone, well, how about just have self-control? I think that applies here in the realm of pornography. It's like, master yourself. And I think our desire to properly love women and to be good human beings can be stronger than our desire to exploit. And if that doesn't seem right to you, or if that doesn't seem like that is the case for you, I would suggest that you start monitoring the sort of entertainment you are watching and listening to. Because if you're watching and binging on Netflix shows where people are being exploited and used and had, all of a sudden you begin to believe that this is just reality, and it's not reality, it's not reality. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Love People Use Things podcast. Would you do me a favor? I'm actually really asking you for a favor right now. I'm trying to get this podcast out to more and more people. If you would share it on your social media, that would just be huge. I would really appreciate it. Lovepeopleusethings.fm is the website. I just want more and more people to hear this. And if you're listening to this, if you've listened all the way through this podcast, clearly you think that this is an important message. So why don't you help me spread it? Because unlike the porn industry, I don't have a lot of money to pay for advertising and stuff. So if you would help me just get the word out about this, I greatly appreciate it. And as always, if you like the show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Chat with you next week. Thanks.